I'm joined today by Bill Carr, co-author of Working Backwards, subtitled Inside Stories and Secrets from Inside Amazon. It's written by two former colleagues who worked very, very closely with Jeff Bezos to make Amazon the enormously, phenomenally successful organization it is today. Bill, delighted to speak to you.
Thank you, Frank. Thanks for having me on.
But Working Backwards is both the title of your book and of the advisory business that you founded with Colin Breyer, your co-author, and yeah, I gather you're still working together. This, of course, refers to putting the customer first and working backwards from there. Is that the biggest lesson you would say that you learned from your time working for Amazon, or if not, what was?
Well, when we sat down to write this book, we realized it would be a lot easier and more direct if we actually made this a one-thing book. Most business books are a one-thing book. They have one central concept, and they focus on that. However, after many hours of conversation, we realized, of course, that there was no one thing that explained Amazon's spectacular success. But the one thing, if we could define it as one thing, it's that we define it that Amazon has created an invention machine, and that machine has multiple parts to it. One part to that is customer obsession, the working and the corresponding working backwards process. But the best way to define the Amazon invention machine is that it is both 14 leadership principles that the company has established that define how the company makes decisions and thinks, as well as how the company thinks about hiring and developing their talented leaders. And then the second part to it is 5 repeatable, scalable processes that define how the company hires people, how the company conducts meetings and makes decisions, how the company develops new products, which is the working backwards process, how the company organizes teams for speed and success, and then finally, how the company manages their business by focusing on input metrics rather than output metrics. So sorry for the long answer to your question, but
that's okay.
The one thing is really the combination of these processes and principles that have now been ingrained in the company and will allow them to be successful probably for decades to come.
The book's subtitle includes the word secrets, very, very intriguing. For someone who's not maybe familiar with having worked inside Amazon, as most of your readers would be, what would be surprising? What would fall into the category of maybe something that would be something we didn't know?
Yeah, so I think that what anyone who has studied Amazon at all knows is that the company has been, of course, innovative and has developed all kinds of innovative products ranging from digital devices like the Kindle, the Echo and Alexa service, retail services like grocery stores where you just walk out, you don't have to use a cashier, and of course, Amazon Web Services. But what people don't realize is that Jeff Bezos and the management leadership team of the company have been equally inventive and thoughtful in developing effectively a management science, a distinctive management science, some of which borrows from what other companies have developed and some of which is unique and specific to the Amazon. And that management science comprises this invention machine that I mentioned. And that what I think would surprise people is that Jeff's legacy may not be from decades from now. It may be actually this management science that he's developed as much or more so than the innovative products and the successful company that he's built.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you that actually. Do you believe that Jeff is going to stand out in time as one of the most visionary, insightful business leaders of this generation?
I do. If you think about in this current generation, who else would be on that list with him? Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, Bill Gates. So I think I think Jeff has already accomplished enough that he is certainly going to remain on that list. And I think that given that Jeff is still going, there's much more for him to do. Blue Origin, his rocket ship company, is just getting going. He's really just starting to enter the world of philanthropy, which has really evolved and changed everyone's perspective on Bill Gates, where most people would argue, most people did not think of him terribly favorably in his first act as the founder and CEO of Microsoft, but his second act has really changed his perception in the world and the way, and frankly, the contributions he's making to the world. And so I believe that not only the kinds of insights that we're sharing in working backwards about other ways that Jeff is contributing to the field of management science, but I think there's much more ahead for Jeff to build and contribute. And, he's changed his role at Amazon, but he's not leaving. So if I would not be surprised if Jeff has, 2 more decades at Amazon before he retires.
One of the most important things, I suppose, that he achieved, particularly as the business kind of started to scale, is obviously he couldn't be everywhere. I mean, you document in the book the early days where he could swivel his chair around and see what was going on, but clearly, as the business scaled, he couldn't do that. But what you described the process where you effectively codified these sort of principles, and I think that's really what happened with the 14 principles that you talk about in the book. And new recruits spend a lot of time, obviously, learning and getting indoctrinated into this kind of way of thinking. Do you think that these skills, or to what extent do you think these skills are transferable, though, to other businesses? I mean, you talk a lot about mindset, sort of a way of thinking, but those 14 principles, are many of them actually, like a template that we can take from?
Well, our supposition is not that. First of all, there are lots of great ways to run a company, and what we are not attempting to do in this book is say that Amazon has developed the best way to run a company. But we are positing, of course, is that they have developed a very specific and distinctive way of running a company, and the results are self-evident that this way works. They're tried and true, they're tested. So if you wish to, you as a leader running your organization, whether that be a small organization or large, for-profit, not-for-profit, B2B, B2C, most good leaders stand on the shoulders of others. They observe what others have done that are successful. And Amazon was no different than that. In the early days, Jeff and his leadership team read management books about great companies of the past, whether those be GE, Procter & Gamble, Toyota. And the management practices of these companies inspired Jeff and the leadership team to develop and invent many things. The leadership principles themselves are really distinctive to Amazon. So while it's not, I wouldn't advise a company to simply take Amazon's 14 leadership principles and adopt them. The goal is not to say you should become a mini Amazon. Each company has its own distinctive culture, and I would submit that if you look at the most successful companies in history, each one of them has a very distinctive culture. And so what we recommend the companies do is to develop their own set of leadership principles. And the mistake a company would make is having a void and not actually codifying and making clear to the rest of the organization, what does role model leadership look like in our company? And so what we recommend is that each company develop their own leadership principles. And we have a process that we work with companies to help them do that. And then the processes that Amazon have developed, these actually are repeatable, scalable processes that any company, should they wish to adopt them and implement them, they could do so. So these are not necessarily distinctive to one particular company's culture or another. They can be useful anywhere. So every company needs to know how to hire people. Every company needs to know how to make decisions, how to develop new products, how to run their business, how to organize. And so, and again, we're not suggesting that every company should take all 5 of them. Leaders could take, 1, 2, 5, whatever they want. And the benefit also is that a lot of these processes are fractal in quality, and they can work whether you are, a 10-person company or a 100-person company. So I think the biggest, the point to make is that Amazon faced the same problems that most companies that are growing very fast face. They just came up with different solutions for how to address those. And anyone can learn from these, and anyone can adopt them should they wish to.
I was thinking that while you mightn't take the 14 principles, there could be a couple of things there that you could dive in and learn from. I'm thinking, for example, of the bar razor system, where you thoroughly vet candidates, and that you don't engage in kind of groupthink in the interviewing process. I guess a lot of companies could learn something about that one. And the other one was about the 6-page written report, because I think you explained very cogently there actually why PowerPoint presentations can sometimes appear great because the presenter is very slick and polished and the graphics are lovely, but maybe the substance isn't there. So I think I was certainly picking out things there from my own point of view that I thought were interesting. I guess that's how other people might view it as well.
Yeah, so just to be completely clear, the 14 leadership principles are distinct and different from the 5 processes that we describe in the book. Bar raiser is a process, not a principle. The 6-page narrative is a process, not a principle. And yes, these, should anyone want to adopt these can be implemented at your company, and we strongly recommend. They're battle tested, they're tried and true. If you think about the 6-page narrative process, it's really a back to the future sort of process. So there was a time that some of your readers will remember, but your younger ones will not, when PowerPoint did not exist. And business meetings had to be conducted without the magic of PowerPoint slides. And most companies conducted those through business memos. And that's sort of a lost art. And in fact, one of the companies I worked for early in my career, Procter & Gamble, the concise business memo was actually a very important part of the company's culture and how the company made sure that they distilled thoughts carefully. But yeah, PowerPoint results in incomplete and sloppy thinking, and it doesn't actually dive into the details. It doesn't force the creator of a PowerPoint deck to really think through hard problems and to be able to connect the dots, take disparate data points and connect the dots for the reader. It's much harder to write a good business narrative than it is to create a PowerPoint deck. But companies that do this, they'll find that their teams who conduct meetings instead with a written document, that their teams will be forced to think through their problems more carefully and clearly. They'll be able to communicate 7 to 8 times more information to the meeting participants than they could through a PowerPoint deck. And you'll find that your management and your leadership team will be better informed about the business and better able to actually communicate and make good decisions with their teams. And this one practice alone, frankly, helps explain how it is that Amazon and Jeff are able to have their imprint and their fingerprints in such a vast array of businesses that are so different from each other.
The principles and the processes that you're describing in great detail. In the second half of the book, you get onto the business of invention, about innovation. Is that a cultural thing more than anything, that you actually have this environment where it's okay to fail? I think, isn't he famously quoted saying that he wants Amazon to be the best company in the world to fail in? Can you talk to me a little bit about that, please?
Well, it is a cultural thing. Most companies are risk averse. Most companies and managers at most companies prefer to avoid any kind of failure. Is seen as failure is seen as a personal and career stain, and that should be sought to be avoided and removed at all costs. And I can tell you from my own experiences at Amazon, in fact, that having worked on things that were risky and unknown for many years. So today, everyone takes for granted that Prime Video, which is one of the top, 2 or 3 global, streaming movie and TV services, that it would be a foregone conclusion that anyone in the right mind would be happy to be part of that team. And today that probably is true. But I can tell you that for of the 10 years that I founded and ran that business, that for the first 8, in many cases, I couldn't even convince people within Amazon who were managing existing businesses with an existing P&L of a certain size to take the risk to come over and join my team, because most people, even at a company like Amazon, are risk averse. And they think short term. They think about what do I have? What is it I'm managing today? Even though this business may not be that fast growing, they perceive that their positional power is derived from the number of zeros with the revenue of their business and the number of people that report to them. And what Amazon seeks to do is to, in fact, encourage people to say, no, that's not the case. You don't get any credit for how many people work in your organization. You don't get any credit for how big the revenue number is for your business. You get credit for, are you actually going out and creating real value by inventing new businesses on behalf of customers? And if you have that spirit of invention, and if you actually really are taking risks and inventing new things, you're going to fail some percentage of the time. And as I document in the book, I failed many times as I sought to develop new things at the company, and the company itself has failed. But Jeff and the leadership team didn't look at that as a blight on my career. They looked at that as something to learn from, and had a culture of making sure that people then communicated what they learned from that failure, to teach others about that, and to grow and develop and move forward to succeed based on those failures. Most people who have been very successful in their careers have also encountered serious failure too.
You say that you feel that Amazon has been a very sort of misunderstood company. My apologies about this. I've been Zoom invaded by. Move a second. We can edit it. Oh dear. Yeah, come on, guys. Out you go. That's the only downside of working from home, Bill.
Yes.
Sorry. Yeah, I was about to ask. Yes, I'll just reframe it. You say in the book that a lot of people believe that Amazon is a sort of a misunderstood company. I think one of the reasons for that is the fact that the company hadn't, like for many years, didn't actually make money ostensibly. Probably was making money, but was reinvesting essentially. And Wall Street for a long time misunderstood the company. Presumably that has changed.
Well, I think yes and no. I think the reality is that Amazon is an unconventional company. And there's a simple example to this. In my tenure at the company, I hired and recruited many senior executives into the company who had long and successful careers outside of Amazon. And but what they would encounter in their first few months of the company was bewildering, and as if they had crossed over into a different universe. And that's because the way that the company actually operates and makes decisions and thinks is so different than standard companies. So when you think, most companies think in terms of quarterly results. They think very short term. They think in spans of time of 3 months, maybe 12 months. And the reasons for that are obvious, which are that most executive compensation is actually tied to that. And Wall Street is focused on, what are you going to do this quarter? At Amazon, compensation is not tied to that. Compensation is really, frankly, set up in such a way that success is defined over a sort of a 4 to 5 year period. And that Jeff thinks in windows of chunks of 10 to 20 year periods. And that when if you just change that, so that long-term orientation changes so many different things about how you do work. So most companies, so simple decisions about when we had to decide how to react to competitors on aggressive pricing. The typical reaction that many companies would make to sort of preserve as much gross margin as possible, that was not our reaction. Our reaction was to immediately make sure that we had equally competitive prices with our with whatever competitor was out there, and then in the background over the course of weeks, days, months, figure out how we could make sure that we had a cost structure that made us allowed us to afford that. And that's just one example where that's backwards of how most companies would do it. They would first make sure that they had the cost structure to afford it, and then would go out and lower the prices. Another example is quality of service versus low cost. Most people hypothesize, well, you can't offer a high quality service and have low cost. They don't go together. You can pick one or the other. And Amazon and Jeff rejected that thinking in the early days, which is why people experienced a level of customer support that was, beyond exceeded their expectations. We invested heavily in how could we enable a fantastic level of customer support, but still have a low cost structure. Being able to do both of those things at once is very hard. Being able to do one or the other isn't so hard. So when you, and those are just two examples, but I could, if we sat here all day, I could give you 100 examples of this where these kinds of decisions and trade-offs are not typical of how companies think about things. And oh, by the way, they are not the easy path. And candidly, most people, most companies if they're given a choice between an easier path or a harder path, they will take the easier path.
The value of the company cost has soared over the last 12 months. It's it's having a great pandemic. Funny enough, is that have you any sort of views on that? Is that just a kind of a reaching an inflection point on a lot of things that were happening, and then that you have this situation where, okay, I guess retail is closed down, large parts of the world, people are at home, people are on their devices. How do you explain this phenomenal growth?
Well, I mean, if you're talking about the share price of the company, in the short term, Wall Street is a voting machine, and in the long term, it's a weighing machine. So it's useful to ignore and not speculate on short-term gyrations of the market. And for any of your young viewers out there that get caught up in day trading or thinking about GameStop, that is foolish behavior, because go read A Random Walk Down Wall Street, because if you think that you can time the market, you are wrong. And trying to understand these gyrations is a fool's errand. Professionals on Wall Street don't get it right. So I would just say, having worked inside the company for more than 15 years and having watched the stock price do this throughout that time, I can tell you that inside the company, it felt like this. Whereas outside the company, the outside world thinks that this is going on, but inside the company, we knew that this was going on. And so, as Jeff would often say at an Amazon all hands meeting, if the stock price had just shot up by some amount, like say 30%, he would say, some of you may have noticed that the stock price went up 30% over the last few months. And I would just discourage you all from feeling 30% smarter about that, because it's going to feel really bad when the stock price goes down by 30%, because then you're going to have to feel 30% dumber. So in short, so I can't explain whatever is happening in the short-term voting machine, but I can say that, of course, the long-term, if you look at, of course, the secular trends and what Amazon focuses on are those atomic customer level needs that are not going to change over time. And in the retail business, those needs are people always will prefer to shop at a store with greater selection, lower prices, and fast delivery. And since I joined the company back in 1999 through today, the retail business just is on those three things. And if you work on those three things over a long, long period of time, as they get better and better and better, then you're going to deliver more value for customers, and I'm sure the stock price will follow. The same is true of the Amazon Web Services business. It is much more convenient to use compute as a service rather than stand up your own servers and maintain your own fleet. And by continuously investing in the needs of business customers for cloud computing, that the trends are extremely favorable to the company. And so I would hold I would either buy or hold one's stock in Amazon for long periods of time, years or decades.
There is something of a backlash against big tech at the moment. You'll be sort of familiar with this. And many people feel that Amazon and indeed other Facebooks and Googles have become a little bit too powerful. Much as they're admired for their business acumen, there's a sense that maybe have crushed the small guys. Maybe it's not a level playing field any longer. Do you have any views on that?
Yeah, this is you can't ignore this issue. You can't ignore the fact that so much of the based on the power laws of the internet, this has been true for a long time, and so this is somewhat inevitable based on the way those power laws work, which are that the number one or number two services in any one category or three accrue substantial value. But no one uses the fourth most popular search service. And no one wants to use the fourth most popular social networking service. And there's a lot less value in the fourth most popular e-commerce service as well. And so as a result, these institutions have become very large. I don't, in many ways, I certainly could if you had told me in 1999 that Amazon would by 2021 be on track to do $500 billion in revenue, I would have been a little alarmed and surprised by that. But these companies they're large institutions, and any large institution should be scrutinized and should expect that scrutiny. And I think that's one of the real challenges and adaptations that each one of these companies needs to make, is they need to understand and embrace and get good at being part of that discourse with the public in an open and forthcoming way, and be truly open to examining their own policies and practices based on this feedback, and making sure that they really are continuously earning the public trust. Because when I was at the company, to earn the public trust, it meant, do I get packages to customers on time, or when they click play to stream a video, does it start and does it never pause, rebuffer, or stutter? I think there's a new level of public trust, which are the policies and practices of Amazon, Google, Facebook, Microsoft. Are these companies acting in ways that are good for the people that work there, the communities in which they operate, and for the world as a whole?
You posed the question there, Bill, but do you have an opinion? Do you have anything approaching your own view on this?
Well, my opinion is, as I stated, is that these companies need to be open to feedback. They need to be forthcoming. They need to, they should not resist this process. They should be open to it, and they should embrace it.
Okay.
And so they should take this feedback and seek and consider specific remedies based on whatever it is they're hearing from the public, because that is the definition of earning the customer's trust, in my opinion, has changed. And so they need to update their thinking about that to incorporate all this all these topics and all this feedback.
So it's no longer a case of simply being Darwinian about this, the survival of the fittest, that there is there's another parallel consideration that needs to be borne in mind.
Yeah, if
long-term survival of these companies, in fact.
Yeah, if they want to remain, look, I'm not a regulator, and so I am certainly not, and candidly, it's hard for me to see in many cases where breaking up some of these companies, would solve a whole lot.
Yeah.
Like separating AWS from the e-commerce business at Amazon would not address, I don't think it would address any one of the issues that people are bringing up. Or, and I'm not an expert on Facebook, but if you disaggregated Instagram and from Facebook and WhatsApp, how much of a difference would that make? I don't know. So what I'm proposing instead as a business person is that I would think about my business differently. I would think about my business as not just earning, in the early case of Google, the way you earn your business is by having the best search result. When someone typed in a keyword search, that you delivered the best result. I think that trust is different now, which also means, do my policies and practices, am I earning the public's trust? Now, some of these companies face very challenging and difficult decisions. I do not envy the kinds of problems that someone like Mark Zuckerberg has to tackle, being the arbiter of truth, being the arbiter of what should and should not be in the public discourse. Those are horribly challenging problems. There are no easy answers to them.
And we did talk a little bit about this earlier on, but obviously Jeff's announcement that he's stepping back from leading the organization as such. Do you think he's still going to be a very, very powerful guiding force in the background? And how is that going to work? And then how do you see Amazon continuing to progress in the years ahead?
Well, the short answer is yes. And anyone that thinks that he's not going to be doesn't know anything about Jeff or Amazon. I mean, the short answer is that he's just changed his role. But to think that Jeff is walking away from Amazon and not going to be involved just suggests you don't know Jeff or Amazon. So let me assure you that he will be, I would be shocked if he's not still heavily involved in the company. And they stated specifically what he's going to be involved in. He's going to be involved in the future, in defining the future of the company, defining new products, new invention. And frankly, that's what he has been involved in for most of the time that I worked with him. That's where he spent the majority of his time. So in many ways, that is unchanged. And he's the chairman of the board. So that is a very, very important job in the company. And he's the largest shareholder. So yes, Jeff doesn't fancy himself a retirement of fishing and playing golf. He is passionate about and loves what he does. So he will be deeply, deeply involved. As far as where the company will go in the future, your guess is as good as mine. I could certainly explain sort of what I would expect from the existing businesses of the companies, and everything from e-commerce to AWS to digital devices and digital media. I expect to see, of course, continued investment in all three of these areas, as well as their nascent, physical retail business, their very large marketplace business with merchants. All of these, I think, continue to see more and more investment here. In terms of what they may in the future on behalf of customers, your guess is as good as mine.
Well, it's an absolute pleasure. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you so much, Frank.